on Liberia. Yeah. From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Reliable information. History. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another session of Focus on Liberia. I am your host, Gabriel Carter. Today I have in the studio with me Professor Syed, and we will be talking about Africa diaspora remittance, the amount of money we send to Liberia, how that money can be translated into actual development. We're also going to be looking at other countries and see how other countries are leveraging the power of their diaspora remittances to channel development. Hopefully, we will be joined by Larry and other folks that should be on here to help us expand and talk about this topic. This is something very important. I know uh, Prof can actually agree with me. I think we sent about 800 million back home annually. And as the year grows, we go by, that amount will continue to increase. I think last year it was less than 800 million. So this year I think it's about 800 million. Next year it'll probably be higher than that. So, but the problem here is how do we make good use of this money, right? It's usually you and myself. I send money back home to my family. You do send money back home to your family, whether it's for school fees, for construction, or whatever it is that you're engaging that equates to this quantum of $800 million. The problem here is how do we pull that capital together and make something good happen for it in our country? You know, we have good examples for other countries, such as Nigeria. I think Ghana has a fund as well. Zambia, I think Rwanda has a diaspora funds as well. So we're going to be looking at several examples to really uh, make the case for Liberia. Uh, Prof, thank you for taking the time to join us. I know this is early in the morning, Saturday morning. You could have been out here doing other things, but you know you took your time to join us here. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Um, do you
Thank you,
have?
Gabriel. Yeah,
Please go ahead.
thank you so much for including me in this important discussion. As you say, remittances to Liberia is a very hot topic in the diaspora as well as in Liberia.
Yeah.
We've been sending people have been sending money home for decades, as somebody just mentioned in the comments. I think the
Right.
question is, why is it increasing? Because for me, I would think that if you're sending money home, if you're sending, let's say, 800 million to Liberia in 2001, and
Right.
then you come to 2005, 2004, and you are selling 1 billion, it's
Right.
increasing.
Yeah.
So remittances should be going down, so that if remittances is seen as a vehicle for development,
Yeah.
personal as well as national development, that means
Yeah.
that the money should be going down, because it should be going down because they're saying, okay, I helped this person and this person doesn't need my help any longer.
Yeah.
But in fact, the remittances, they're increasing.
Right.
But do we see that correlation of growth in Liberia as opposed to the increase in remittances from the diaspora? I think those are some of the questions that we will be discussing today.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's quite of an interesting take. I don't think we look at it that way. That you said if that if what was your question again? If the remittances are increasing in
Yeah,
Liberia, right?
yeah,
Sorry, yeah.
yeah. Because
Sorry, could you pose that
if I'm
question again?
giving, yeah, if I'm giving my family or a friend
Right.
$50 every month in
Mhm.
2002,
Right.
why am I giving that same friend $200 in 2005? If that money
Mm.
is to be used for that friend to develop a business,
Yeah.
why is it now that it's increasing? That friend now should say to me, I no longer need the money, because the money that you sent me, I have utilized it effectively, right?
Ah.
I always say that one time there was a speaker who came to speak, and we asked him and we said, how do you know when your work is done in that country? And he said, when they no longer need me, right?
Mhm.
So the diaspora money should be that way. There should be other sources of income that that person can plug into and say thank you, and say thank you very much for, oh, sorry,
Yep. It's okay.
and say thank you very much for helping me, but I no longer need help. Do you
Yeah.
see? So
Yeah.
when people say, oh, the diaspora, the money is increasing, it went from $500 million in 2002 to 1 billion. Why should it be increasing? That's the question.
Right.
Why should remittances be increasing?
Phew.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
I think and I think I heard you correctly, but I just wanted you to maybe
yeah,
you know qualify your questions.
yeah.
That is quite of a interesting take, and I have 2 points to make, and I
Okay.
will compare it one to. So let's look at the aid. Forget the diaspora remittances that we get in Liberia. Let's look at the aid that we get from the international partner. Do you see that
Okay.
same correlation, right? As we
What
continue
is
to
it? Yeah,
raise
yeah.
the correlation here is that as you see the country continue to grow since the war ended, right? From a GDP standpoint, from a budgetary standpoint. However, in addition to that, the aid that we get from the West and other international partner also continue to grow, right? So the same thing that
Yes.
applies to the remittances that we send to Liberia, as you and I and others to their families, the same way, just as equally as we do not manage the aid that we get as a country from other international partners to say, we're getting this amount of money, let's put it to development so that way we can be less dependent on aid. Is the same way that your family, my family, and others that are watching now who's actually send money year in, year out to their family are not looking in that same direction. Meaning, if I continue to send you $200 every year, 200, let's say not just $200 every month, I mean, yeah, but let's
I'm
say,
listening. I'm listening.
right, 500, 600, or $1,000 every month, right? I expect you to take some of that money, or maybe you and I can have a sit down to say, okay, if I'm sending you 1,002 every month, let's sit
Yes.
down and have a discussion in terms of maybe you can use $400 on this money every month. What about the
Yes.
other 800? How do we channel that into an investment? How do we channel that into a business? So that way, if I no longer have the ability to give you 1,200 every month, you have a thriving business that can sustain you, right? But I think the biggest mistake that all of us here in the diaspora made, and we have to hold ourselves accountable to that as well, is we do not have this conversation. We just think these are family, these are friends, these are relatives, and others
Yes.
that we feel privileged to be in a position to help, but we do not channel that development aspect to them to say, let's have a discussion, let's have a sit down. I'm going to continue to send
Yes.
this amount of money to you. This is what I want you to do because I may no longer something catastrophic could happen to me, right? And I may no longer be in a position to help you. In that case, what happens to you, right? And that's I think that's the tragedy that we have in not just in Liberia but across the continent as a whole. And this is why you see every year we send more money home. They continue to increase. So like you rightly stated, there's a correlation there. As the economy grow here in the West, we send more money back home and it continues to grow, but there is nothing tangible we're seeing from there. Liberia is a perfect example. So that's the first case that I wanted to make. But I'll let you come in. Right.
Yeah, I think that with aid, the fact is that aid comes with conditionalities.
Yeah.
We want you to do this. We want you to do this. We want you to use our experts. We want so it comes. It is their money, so they dictate the dance. So you
Right.
you you have to follow their dictates. With family, it's more emotional.
Right.
If your family calls you and say my child is sick or I need to go to school, that knee jerk reaction is to help in that instant.
Right.
Those things are not what we're talking about. We're talking about this constant stream of draining remittances that's going
Uh-huh.
home, for birthdays, for weddings, for this, for that. So the question now is, you as the aid donor,
Right.
if let's put it that way, if we want to make the correlation, if you
Right.
as the aid donor, what are the requirements, what are the criteria, what are the caveats you're putting in to say I'm sending this money, but this stream will end by the end of this year
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sending you this money to enable you to stand on your own. So what's happening is that if you look at the diaspora remittances
Mm-hmm.
as aid,
Yeah.
as aid with no conditionalities, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the one where you send money home to build a house. That's not remittances. That's for your own personal purchase. I'm saying, if you're saying, okay, I'm going to keep sending you money, what are the conditionalities that you're putting in? Like these aid agencies are doing to say, um,
Mm-hmm.
we would like for you to do this. We would like for you to, I will send you this money, but there will be a time when it will decrease, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in anticipation of that time, I would urge you to try uh, um and save money. Do something more tangible so that you don't need me anymore. The success of that relationship is when you don't need me anymore. You
Yeah.
see, and that's what I'm talking about. And let me just say one thing, Gabriel. I've been getting some comments.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Please excuse me, guys. My camera was not working and it's a little blurry. So I know
Yeah.
some people are sending me emails. I'm looking at it, but no, it's my camera is like that. But let's focus on the conversation and
Yeah.
we'll
No.
go
Why
from there.
would you want to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
okay.
Go, no. Go ahead. Ask the question you wanted to ask. Did you want to? You just wanted to address that aspect of it.
Yeah, because and also I'm not preaching to only the Liberians in Liberia. The diaspora, they always say we send money home.
Right.
But if you look at it, you're sending money home to your family.
Right.
This is your family. You want to send money home. But the issue is, now that you're sending money home,
Mm-hmm.
are you putting to say, okay, let's do this, let's do that? And now what is happening is that there's now a shift as
Yeah.
we start looking at other countries and what they are doing, and I'm sure you will discuss that in the later half, those are
Yeah.
the things that we're looking at and saying, but wait, are we sending money home in a
Okay.
constructive manner? You know,
Mhm.
and that's what I think I wanted to add. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. And we have a I think, and thanks to you, I think you put a very compelling presentation together. So I think let's just go through that. Maybe it'll help us, I'll give a good outline and direct the show in a way we need to talk about it, because I don't. There's a lot to talk about. Maybe this can be even a 2 series or even 3 series conversation, because there's a lot to talk about. But let's go through this outline that you have out here, and then maybe we can take some questions from there. And I think one of the questions that you have on here is, why are remittances necessary?
Yeah.
Why do we think this is necessary? And I think this is a heavy loaded question that has multiple answers. Like, from you and I, we can look at the answers from a different perspective. Why do we think it's necessary to continue to send money back home, right? Now, for those who are receiving the money, they could have a different perspective as to why that is necessary. And I think you rightly elaborated on some of the reason why that is, you know, necessary on their part. But I think let's look at it in all encompassing in terms of why is it necessary. Now, I want you to put two hats on, from the person sending the money back home, and also put yourself in the shoes of the person receiving it. Why do you think it's necessary?
I think like aid, they have defense aid and they have humanitarian aid. And
All
like
right.
I said, if a relative or a friend calls you and say my child is sick,
Yeah.
you're not thinking, why is it necessary? You do it right away, as
Yeah.
opposed to somebody calling you and saying, oh, I need my Saturday, or I need my birthday, or I need, those are not things that are necessary, 'cause I mean, you know, it's your choice to celebrate
Yeah.
your birthday, if you don't have money, that's it. But I think you're right, Gabriel, when you say that we should have a two-part show on
Right.
inviting Liberians in Liberia
Yeah.
to speak on remittances, because most of the time when I'm going through Facebook, what I see is I see people saying, oh, we send money, and what you're
Yeah.
doing in that way is you're making the recipient lesser. You're diminishing
Ah.
the recipient. You see, that is very, that saying, when you're giving bread, leave your camera at home.
Yeah.
So we always say, oh, but we're sending money home, we're sending money home. And the recipient, of course, as you know, Liberians say, what make a mention, make him vex.
Yeah.
So the man is saying, but wait now, just because you send me this $100, you have to talk to me that way. No, you don't have to talk to me that way. So I think if we have a show
Yeah.
that can bring the two together and say, okay, what is your view on remittances? You who are in Liberia,
Mhm.
what's the view you have on remittances? Because I think that would be a very good discussion to
Yeah.
show also that the recipient, is also a person of dignity. And
Yeah.
also, they have things that they want to do, but maybe you guys can meet and say, okay, I'm sending you this money,
Yeah.
but tell me, is the end of the year reasonable for me to start sending you your Saturday so you can do something for yourself? Or can I help you to start a little business? And then after that business, then you don't need me anymore, because that's the success of the relationship.
Yeah.
When we are meeting as friends and not as recipient and donor, you know?
So let
Yeah.
me
Hello, Dr. Kennedy.
Prof, Larry, welcome to the show. Let me say this quickly before I bring in Larry. And I think you said something very important, and it's something that I think one of my favorite basketball player always said, Kobe Bryant. He said, when you are in a position of power, in a position where you have a little bit to do for yourself or everybody else around you, the first inclination is to just help everybody, to just give everybody money, because you're in a position now where you can do it without even having, and it won't even do anything to your wealth, right? You can help all your family around you. But he said what that does is, every one of those people around you have God-given talent. And if you think
Yes.
because you're in this position now where you can just give them money every time they come to you, to your point, you think you might be helping. But in actually, what you're doing, you are killing their talent from each individual from identifying their own
Yes.
and becoming
Yes.
this to self-actualize. So on our part, we think we can just continue to send this money because we have it. But what we're doing, we're making those people lazy. We're making people lazy. We're not making them innovative, but just not sitting down and having this conversation is to say, like you rightly pointed out, this is how much I'm sending back home. What can you do with it? What can we do with it? How can you self-sustain yourself? Because that way you want to put the person in a position where even though you do have that ability to continue to provide for them, send them money every month, but you want them to be in a position where they're able to stand on their own feet to sustain themselves, whether
Yes.
you can or whether you cannot. So that's the point that you actually made. But let me turn this over to Larry since he's here. Larry, thank you for joining us. We are talking about the impact of remittances, and I think the first question that we had was, why are they important? Why do we think remittances are important? But I have another question on that. Hey,
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing me on, Gabriel. Really appreciate having a conversation. So, remittances are no substitute for true economic development, right? So,
mm,
they are important to a lot of developing countries like Liberia, places like Nigeria, India, Ghana. They receive a lot of remittances, but they're important because when you have people in the diaspora sending money back to their homeland, that money goes directly to recipients, right? As
mhm,
opposed to the money going through some government entity that ends up taking maybe 10 or 15% off the top, maybe even more. It
mhm,
goes directly to these recipients. And to a certain extent, it can help in terms of alleviating poverty to a certain extent, right? Because if you look at
Mm.
Liberia, we have close to around 50 or maybe even more people who are food insecure. So
yeah,
that money can go directly to the recipient and it can go directly to them purchasing food. You can think of it as a form of foreign direct investments, right? We know a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
countries are anxious to get their hands on money for foreign investments, but the remittances also serve as a type of investment because it's going to people. But here's the problem, which is why countries that tend to receive a lot of remittances, they don't grow as fast as what we expect. Because here's the problem,
Mhm.
and I think you guys may have mentioned this. The folks who are sending money, more than likely, they have left the country. So you have an issue of brain drain,
yeah,
right? Because they've left the country to seek employment other places, whereby they could be in their own country helping with the development. But because the country lacks the opportunities for them to, make money and be more productive, they've left. So now they're sending money back home, but it doesn't lead to development because the people who have left, you do need them back home, but you don't have enough opportunities back home in order for them to stay there. So it's sort of like a poverty trap, right?
mhm,
You're damned if you stay, but if you leave, the country doesn't develop because they need you. But remittances, to a certain extent, it does help. You know, the problem we also see with a lot of underdeveloped countries is the money isn't used for investment purposes.
okay,
It goes directly to consumption. So if you're consuming everything you receive, you become reliant, you become dependent on that person sending the money to you.
mhm,
And if that money doesn't come, then you run into a lot of issues. Because if that, it's not used for actual investment purposes, meaning a large percentage of it is not used for investment purposes. So remittances, countries do need them.
yeah,
It help because if I send $100 to Liberia, if you were to use that $100 to go to the market and buy something, the person at the market who's selling that thing will have to go to the farmer to do a purchase on the farmer. So it follows this thing that John Maynard Keynes, the economist, spoke about, right? The Keynesian model. It keeps rotating, the value keeps rotating and it leads to development, not to
yeah,
development, but it leads to consumption.
yeah,
So, but then you get stuck on expecting remittances on a monthly basis, which
yeah.
then just makes you fully reliant on the diaspora, which is not a strategy for development.
So thank you, and thank you both. Let me pose this other question on the other side of the spectrum. So I think what you guys answered was basically that from the consumer side. So you and I sending money to family and also the family members receiving that money and doing what they need to do with it, whatever they have done with it, right? But from a government standpoint, right, why do we think that is important for them, at least for sub-Saharan African country? And I have the question on board here, which is basically the economic impact of foreign exchange. Because I think for most African country, what it does, it help prop up their foreign exchange, right? And why do you think that is important for those African countries? But also, most importantly, how do you think they can, you know, have other means for boosting their foreign exchange besides the remittances? If that wasn't available, what other aspect do you think they could use to prop up their foreign exchange? I know it's a heavy loaded question, so I'll let you go, Prof. Larry.
I'll take just a minute to touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
So, the basket of currencies out there, the main ones include the US dollars,
Right.
the Japanese yen, the euros, the UK pound sterling.
Yeah.
So we're buying everything in foreign currency, and if you don't have an influx of foreign currency like comes from the US, it's going to be difficult because the Liberian dollar is not worth a whole lot. I don't want to. Let me just segue real quick. The Liberian dollar is going to appreciate a little bit in value because of what President Trump is doing. Right, he's actually weakening the U.S. dollar. So I checked the central bank's website the other day, but it was kind of weird that while the U.S. dollar is losing value and the Liberian dollar should be appreciating in value, meaning the LRDs, rather than hanging around 200, it should actually be coming down.
Yeah.
It was actually going up, which is weird. So it kind
Because
of
we're
tells me that they're playing
right.
around with the numbers over there, right? Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah.
Gary.
No, I think I was just going to interject to say the reason why that is that because it's how our system is set up, right? We're a fixed exchange rate, right? So there's a target. So and because we're directly pegged to the US dollars, anything that happens to it directly happens to us. Whereas if this was in other country, it will has the opposite. It will have the opposite effect. Where if the US dollar is being weakened, that country currency will go up. But because with us in Liberia, we pegged the Liberian dollar directly to the US dollars. So anything that happens with the US dollars happen to the Liberian dollar. But I just wanted to interject that. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're not using this whole, like if you look at the francophone countries, the franc that has been used in other countries, you can see the changes in it. But let's get back to how it propped up the Liberian economy.
Right.
The influx of dollars or the influx of euros or the influx of any other major foreign currency into the country, it helps because, first of all, the government gets tax revenues from the economic activity created as a result of dollars coming in.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, because everything that is being paid for is usually in dollars, dollars like the major currency out there. So it helps in a way, but it doesn't really solve the problem. Because if you look at the most recent central bank report, we still do have an imbalance. We still do have an imbalance, with the U.S. Right. So I think we just have an economic system in place that it hasn't shown any sign of real growth. So we're always going to have this foreign currency imbalance between whether it's the U.S. or in China or in Europe as well. So it helps a great deal, but it's not the panacea for all things that is ailing the economy.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Before you come in, right, I want to pose this question to you, and I think you may have touched on it earlier, maybe, but I want you maybe to elaborate a little bit more on that. What do you think? Do you think remittances reduce poverty or do they create dependency? And I think you did touch on it a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate on it. And what do you think are the disadvantages of of remittances? Advantages or disadvantages of that?
I think that we spoke on it earlier when we say that there are different types of remittances, but I think that for me, I really do think that it creates dependency
Uh-huh.
because I look at it as a holistic thing. So
Hmm.
for example, if a country has an enabling environment, let's say
Right.
let's say you have a country that has good educational system, good roads, good infrastructure, and everything, and somebody says, "Oh, I need money to start a business," and you are assured of the fact that that person will go to the bank and they will have good interest rate, they will do this, you are saying, "I'm putting my money, and my money is only part of all of these things that come together, right? That
Mhm.
will help." So if somebody is saying, I want to go to school, and you say, okay, the government is providing a very good school, right? But the person needs pencils, they need shoes, they need uniform, right? And
Yeah,
you say, okay, I'm sending you the money for the uniform, because you are confident in the fact that
yeah,
the school will provide a pencil and the copybook. But when that doesn't happen, and you keep sending money home for the shoes, for the school, for the copybook, for the backpack, for the school fees, that creates dependency, because where else would they go? Where else would they go for the school fees if the country is not working? And Dr. Kennedy said that when he said, look, if the many of the countries that get remittances are poor countries,
mm,
but I have not seen anything where you said, oh, it's like aid, right? I mean, like, show me one road that USAID has built, you know
ah,
I mean, they're there for, so they will help other people, but even
yeah,
when they give the money to the NGOs, I'm sorry, some of the NGOs are driving big cars, and they're seeing it now on TikTok, that they're using the money for their own purposes. Now, I'm not here to be preaching. What I'm saying is that remittances go further in a country that works. If the country doesn't work, the remittances will create dependency. Because if you have a country, that says, okay, I have good hospitals, right?
yeah, mhm,
That person is not going to call you to say, oh, I got to go to the hospital and pay the doctor and buy the alcohol and buy the medicine. The person might say to you, oh, I need the money maybe for transportation to the hospital,
yeah.
assured of the fact that when they get to that hospital,
It'll be
everything
taken.
works.
Yeah,
So I think that the question has different nuances. In a country that does not work, remittances create dependencies.
hmm
In a country that does not work, because where
that's
else would
that's
you go, Gabriel? If you're
yeah,
not working, the country is not working, you don't have a job, and you have children. Every week you will be on the phone calling your relative for money, because the country doesn't work.
yeah,
But if the country works, you're not going to do that. You're going to say, you know what, I might call you for Christmas if you can send me a little Christmas, but I'm not going to call you throughout the year, because this country works and I'm a person who's working, I have employment. So that's so remittances dependency is tied to a country's dependency on aid. I mean, that's what I think. Sorry.
that is profound. So remittance dependency is tied to a country's dependency on aid, and
Yes.
that's yeah. And I think we can use the correlation with Liberia as well, even though correlation does not equate to causality. But I think there's a strong case. There's a strong case there that we can make, because there's a perfect. We're in the perfect case, which is Liberia. We're dependent on foreign aid, and also the diaspora remittances continue to increase, but there is nothing we can show for it.
And, and,
Larry,
and Gabriel, just one last thing. You know what would be great? If you have someone in a diaspora who's sending money home to maybe a relative or a friend, right? And that friend has harnessed that money effectively. It would be
sorry,
good to bring them on a show for them to show this reciprocal relationship.
yeah,
Other than that, I mean, yeah. So
yeah. I'm sure there are cases, but hopefully we can get some people to come on here and talk about that on the next show.
yeah.
Uh, Larry, the same question to you. Do you think remittances reduce poverty, or do they create dependency? And what are the advantages and disadvantages uh, of that? Uh,
So if we look at the data, meaning we look at things like the World Bank data, and you look at some of the other data houses out there, remittances have a temporary impact to poverty reduction because it is closely tied to the number of people working in the diaspora and sending back home. So if you look at, for example, like COVID, right? During the time COVID took place, there was a slowdown in economic activity. So the amount of money heading back to Liberia also slowed down equally. And if we go back to the financial crisis that kicked off in the US around like August or so of 2008, you will also notice there was a slowdown in economic activity. Same thing, December of 2013, you look at when the Ebola kicked off, the remittances to Liberia increased at that time, right? But it's not a strategic solution to dealing with poverty. It's
Okay.
a tactical solution because it only works in the short term. It's not a long-term strategic solution. And I say that because I remember the president made a mistake. President Boycott made a mistake. I don't know if he was saying this for fun or he meant it when he mentioned that, the whole deportation thing that is taking place in the US, how President Trump,
Yeah,
Liberians
it's
will
coming.
not be faced with someone called President Trump because he's deporting people. And you hear people saying, what they fail to realize is the opportunity that when people get deported from the US, some of those people that were sending money as remittances back home.
Hmm.
So I didn't think it was something to actually celebrate. Instead, it would have been an opportunity where the president could actually try to reach out by way of the State Department, the embassy, State Department, and say, "Look, listen, we need to find a solution to this immigration or deportation issues that is being faced in the United
Yeah.
States." Because you start deporting Liberians back home, you more than likely will see a drop to maybe a couple of percentage points or so in remittances. So, to answer your question, while it does not reduce poverty on a strategic level, because if it did, Liberia receives between 20 to 25% of its GDP in remittances.
Hmm.
The poverty level in Liberia would not have increased during the time that President Weah was there. There was a certain time President Weah was there where you saw that the value of the LRD fell. It was right around the time they were saying, oh, there was no missing money, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
value of the LRD fell. At the same time, the poverty level increased in the country slightly. And don't say Larry said it, it's on the World Bank's website, right? It ticked up a few percentage points. But remittances were still flowing into the country. One of the things that we fail to calculate, Gabriel, is while money is flowing in the country, you also have to look at the outflow of remittances from Liberia. I
Ah.
can remember the first time that that was years ago, maybe over 10 or so years ago, because I've always watched this remittances stuff. And there was one time the remittances leaving the country was like around 400 or so million. I think it was about 10, 15 years ago. It was so high.
Hmm.
And I think there was a post that Darius Dillon did on Facebook at the time. And he was shocked to see that the amount of money leaving the country was far greater than the money coming in. So what we need to look at is the net remittances. How much is coming in
How much leaving?
compared to how much is actually leaving?
Yeah.
Because on a net remittances basis, you could have a situation where Liberia could be upside down, where we do have more money leaving as opposed to coming in. So that's why if you look at it statistically, you don't see the country developing, right?
Because you
Because
think,
remittances are not just coming there and going
yeah.
towards development. It go into immediate needs, but at the same time, there are people in the country who are remitting money out of the country.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just want to kind of put a balance on remittances. Look at the inflows as well as the outflows.
Yeah, and I think that's a great perspective. I think, as you said, we look at what goes in, but we don't look at what comes out because we're not on the other side of the spectrum, right? And um, again, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, that could take you down to investigating who's, you know, taking money, who's remitting money out of that country, and also most importantly, what type of businesses. And you could, you could have some big names implicated in that, but the also the way I want to look at it as well is, does if we let's say if we were to look at both sides, right, in terms of the inflow and the outflow, and if there was a negative balance, would there be like an impact on the country as well? Do you think, and I think you mentioned that too as well, do you think that is some of the reason why the country is not developing? Because in as much that we're inflowing 800 million annually, there is probably an equal amount that is also leaving as well. So technically, there's a a net zero balance. If you look at it in terms of uh, economic impact to the country, right?
Yeah, let me say this quick, and then I'll turn it over to my fellow panelists. I'll say this real quick.
Okay.
When you look at, so you have to look at it at its totality, the inflows as well as the outflows, not just the inflows. What it does is when you look at the outflows, it should inform policymakers, because this is what Ghana did, right? This is what some African countries did. When they saw the amount of remittances leaving the country, they crafted policies to kind of change the way how those money is actually leaving. So that would inform the central bank, that would inform the Ministry of Finance, that would inform the Liberian government. Let's take a look to see, this money that is leaving the country, what exactly is happening in there? Is there a way that we can create policies to say, look, listen, you need to invest some of this money into Liberia, as opposed to just coming in here, taking and sending it overseas, So when you look at the net between the inflows and the outflows, it should inform policymakers. But I don't think there's been a true study on the outflows of remittances in Liberia. I don't think anyone has done a true study to see how that impacts the economy as a whole. I know Ghana did it. I know Kenya did it. I know it's something that Botswana does on a regular basis. But when I go through like the central bank data, I look at some other data out there, I just don't see anything in terms of a research paper or in terms of a study to see where, what's happening with the outflows. Where is it going? Is it government officials who are taking money and shipping it out to family overseas, or they have businesses overseas? Is it companies that are coming in here with foreign workers that are shipping it back to perhaps like China or India? It gives you a chance to study and understand it, because you cannot make an informed decision without the relevant data to substantiate what it is that you're trying to say. I'll swing it back to you, Gabriel.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the next, before we look at other examples in the region in terms of how they have, solved some of those problems that we have in Liberia in terms of, really coalescing the entire country around, channeling remittances to effect development. Before we get into that, how do we think Liberia can harness remittances effectively? Meaning, and I think at the beginning of the show, this is something we talked about, right? It's just you and I individually, we send this money to families individually. So it is really, it doesn't have a collective, to say, it's not being pulled in a vehicle that is, can be used collectively for, target projects or whatever it is. But in totality, what are some ways that we think Liberia can harness remittances effectively? Prof.
Um, uh, well, I think that's what Dwight Port was discussing some months ago. One of the other things that we I guess many people fail to realize is that when we say remittances, everybody jumps on money,
Mhm.
but there's social and cultural remittances as well, right?
Mm,
So remittances, it's funds, but there's a term that has been coined, social remittances, that people are going home, that exchange of ideas, that flow back to the country of ideas, of norms and way of doing things more effectively. Dr. Kennedy mentioned about the president making fun of the deportees, and that was very sad. And because you see, those people, many of them are not criminals.
mhm.
Some of them, I mean, some of them, they only overstayed, they were on TPS. So
Yeah,
those people are coming with skills. And the president should have made it a priority to say, what are the skills that you have that we could harness in, that knowledge spill over into
mhm.
Africa, into Liberia? What are
Yeah,
the things that people like to say? Liberians like to say, oh, we need doctors. We need doctors. You also need an enabling environment for the doctor to come. What do you need?
yeah,
You need lab assistants. You need nurses. You need trained phlebotomists.
yeah.
That underneath. The doctor can't come to Liberia and say, "Oh, I'm going to examine somebody," when he doesn't have nurses, when he
Yeah.
doesn't have lab assistants. So you need that enabling environment. So those young people, or the older people who were sent back home, what skills do you have? Can we integrate you in some of these ministries so that you can help our young people? What are the skills? Because many of them were not sitting here idly.
Yeah.
They were here on legitimate papers that ended, TPS. So how can we bring them? Another thing is that, so here it is. We know money is coming in. Dr. Kennedy has said there's money coming in. And the government is saying, but how is this money captured besides just for the ordinary Liberian? What do we want to do with this money? Right? So it's up to the government now to craft and say, okay, you know what? We need a big hospital across the bridge, right? And we're going to build this hospital, but we need matching funds. And don't forget, Gabriel, just as Dr. Kennedy is talking about the outflows of money, we are not prophets, we are not philanthropists. Ourselves, we want return on our investment. So the government can say, you know what, we are building this hospital, but you, diaspora, can you match us? So if we need 40 million and we have 20, can you guys harness 20 million? And then you become investors in this hospital. Investors in this hospital, what do you want? You want your investment to work. So maybe we have some Liberian doctors here who will say, every summer I'm going home to go work in that hospital because I want that hospital to be functional. Because when it's functional, I get my money back, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, we're going to talk about other countries like Ethiopia and other countries that have. I mean, in India, it is possible to be in the diaspora and buy a house in India through the Bank of India. Through that. So what you need in Liberia, when we talk about corruption, this thing kills. What we need a functional, fiscal, effective, and transparent infrastructure so that we can know where the money is going, because nobody's going to go waste their money, especially in this time. So giving money to your uncle, your auntie, that's fine, but long term, it does not lead to national development. The country must have a committee to sit down and say, look, what is it that we need? What is it that we need to move our country forward? Do we need a tech industrial park? What do we need? And we're going to build this with our money and the money from the diaspora coming together. And we don't want it to fail. So the diaspora is going to come and help us. But too many times, Gabriel, let's spill over is getting so involved in politics, getting so involved in other things, denigrating somebody. No, if there's money, how are these remittances going to come and work for Liberia? And I think until Liberia itself starts looking at their priorities and put it up, nobody's going to send their money there. Nobody's
Yeah.
going to send their money to the government when the government allegedly or seemingly is corrupt, right? We need transparency to be able to say that. So that's what I think. I mean, a lot of countries are doing it.
Yeah. Larry.
Yeah, so well touched on. Really appreciate that. But this is the key, and this is what I hope people listening will take away from this conversation, right? How do you really tap into remittances? What can you possibly do? This is what policymakers then need to listen to that is being covered over here. I love the fact that we're discussing, social remittances. Me, I'm a finance guy, right? I grew up in the financial sector since I was like a teenager. So I would talk about the financial economic side of things. But here is the key, and other countries have done this. The fact that other countries have done it, Liberia can do it as well. Countries that did it extremely well, like the Philippines. The Philippines
Yes.
is they're like the poster child when it comes to remittances, because
Yes.
the Philippines wasn't really so much concerned about people in the country leaving. They sort of, in a way, promoted it because they knew that those folks leaving would be sending money back, but they turned
Yes.
that money coming back into actual development. So what they did was they emphasized money coming back to go to some type of a social development fund, right? Kenya did this as well. So places like the Philippines, Mexico, Kenya, they did this. They made sure that the unbanked, the people who weren't using the banking system, started using it, because when that
Yes.
remittance come back and people not just burn it in terms of immediate consumption,
Yeah.
they were educated to put part of it in the bank. And you all know that no country can develop without a strong financial sector,
Mhm.
because the money that goes into banks are the ones that are used to make access to capital possible for the entrepreneurs and the business people to go borrow money and go ahead and help with the development. So what they need to do is they need to make sure that they set up things like community investment fund, right? This is what like Kenya, some of these other countries did. You also need to educate the people. Financial literacy is so important. Emphasize financial literacy and let people understand that, look, you need to save some of this money for a rainy day. Because as soon as you get that money, if you just run and you burn it, then it goes back to what we've been discussing all along, that you become a dependent. You're just waiting for that next fix, right? You're waiting for that next remittance to come in for you to survive. We need to educate the people to change that. This is something that the central bank should be putting emphasis on. Over here, the Federal Reserve Bank, they have financial literacy programs. Because I used to do volunteer work and go to some of these nonprofit organizations as part of the work that I did as the executive at JP Morgan.
Mhm.
Part of the work we did was we'll volunteer time and go to some of these nonprofit organizations and teach financial literacy classes, right? So I did that, but the information to teach those classes came directly from the Federal Reserve Bank. You can do the same thing by setting up financial literacy with the central bank in Liberia, right? You can set up like a diaspora investment bond or something.
Mhm.
This is what I believe Kenya has done successfully. But the problem with Liberia, if you're going to do something like that, where you're asking Liberians in the diaspora to invest in that, you have to be extremely careful, because if you use the US financial system to launder money, they're coming for you,
Mhm.
right? Because we saw what happened with Michael Chang, the former finance minister from Mozambique. He did that whole money laundering scam. He got picked up and now he's sitting in a prison over in New York City, the former finance minister. So y'all got to be careful with that corruption in Liberia, because if you're going to do like an investment, a diaspora investment fund, you have to be on the up and up if you're using the US financial system. Otherwise, it comes across like you're laundering money.
Yeah.
I would encourage the central bank to put up a program where you're teaching people to save and invest for a rainy day. So important. So those are the kind of strategic things you can do when it comes to how you can use investment, how you can use remittances strategically.
Mhm.
Put a little bit away. Somebody send you $100. Use the 80-20 rule. Maybe put 20% away for now. Maybe next time you put 30% away. You put $30 away. You put $20 away. If you keep doing that and eventually you use some of that to start a business, then you start depending on yourself. You're not like a drug addict that is waiting for your next fix. Become self-reliant. So there are ways that countries have done it. Study those countries. See what was successful, what wasn't successful. Put together your own little program to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in Ethiopia, when they were building the Great Dam, that they needed billions of dollars, and they invited the diaspora they had a giving week
Mhm.
virtual where people would come and donate money, to build their dam. So when you see, that's what we spoke on before. If you're complaining every time there's no electricity in Liberia, there's no electricity in Liberia. So what you're doing is you're increasing your remittances to Liberia for them to be able to pay for the electricity or to get a generator or so and so. The remittances is going up, but it's not helping the country in any way. But if you get the diaspora to donate, that means that okay, they're donating for national development. But I agree. I mean, I'm not a financial expert, but in Rwanda, that's what they're doing. In Rwanda, they do meet and greet. The Minister of Finance comes and meets them. But another thing that's important for Rwanda is that, we keep talking about diaspora money, money. Rwanda, they reach out to the young people in the diaspora, the youth, those who were not even born in Rwanda but are of Rwanda descent. And they will say, come and visit Rwanda. The same thing they do with the Jewish population. I think they all go. The young people, once when they're young, they must go and do a pilgrimage to Israel.
Israel.
So that's
Yeah.
what they do in Rwanda. They invite people. I mean, I was fortunate to speak with the Rwanda ambassador to the UN, who was a student, Ernest, and Ernest was even telling me that, look, as a like a minister, right? Every year we're looking at the Liberian budget and what's happening. Oh, the Ministry of Transportation getting this amount of money. No, he says, the government says to you, Minister of Transport, what money do you need? Yes, the cap, but what are you going to do with it?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Then the following year, they come back. Have you done all of this? Oh, you didn't do this, but you still have the money. Okay, we're going to reduce the money. This is the money you're going to have now. So it's based on performance,
Mhm.
But every year we sit down and say, oh, the money coming, the money coming. Look, yet Kenya, the Diaspora Alliance, they're investing in hotels and in things, And now people might say, but these are big things that people shouldn't be comparing to Liberia. But why not? Liberia is small, so it should be doing more. As a smaller country. So I'm just trying to say that we need to harness this money that is there. We need to harness this money. And why it's true, as somebody said, that the dam is not finished, but it's being built. So that and once the diaspora sees that the money is being used for national development and they are patriotic, I don't think that there will be hesitancy. But I do think that we should also look at social remittances. We should look at that as well, because not everybody has money, but a lot of people have skills. There could be every December, I think they say people are going back to Liberia. Okay, if they're going back to Liberia, what about us saying, in July or June, skilled people should go, maybe do workshops, meet other people, and the government should be the one inviting. But so often the people in the government, they see us as competitors instead of as people to work with them. You get to Liberia, they think, oh, you're looking for a job. No, you're not looking for a job. But in what ways can we help? So I think this whole relationship of diaspora and people whom should be really discussed. And Gabriel, we will leave it with you and Dr. Kennedy to be able to invite people to do that. Yeah.
And and Larry, and I think this is so. Maybe we should take this conversation in the other direction. And I think we've talked about the diaspora, but based on all the example that you've given, Kenya, Rwanda, India, and the other countries, Ethiopia. What I'm seeing here is a government that is very intentional about what it wants to do, right? Yes, there
Yes.
are, personally, they have their diaspora people sending money to their family, but the government itself is also intentional of harnessing the investment from the diaspora. And with that, they have taken on some of these initiatives that you just elaborated. What is the problem with Liberia government that we do not get it? It's this is not moonshots ideas anymore to say, you know what, nobody have done this before, so we don't want to venture in that route. These are perfect examples, right? That are being done all across the continent, right under our noses. What is the problem with us? That we cannot pick up some of these ideas. We cannot pick up some of these ideas and run with them, or even go to Rwanda, go to Zambia, and talk to our counterparts. How are you guys doing this? How can we learn some of these ideas and bring them to reality? You know, what is the problem? Why is it? Why do you guys think this is not happening?
The problem is there are three key reasons why we're having this problem year after year after year in Liberia. And the late Nelson Mandela said it best. He said, the key issue in Africa is we have a leadership problem. Because a lot of the things that you see happening in other countries is a result of the leadership or the leader having a good vision. So the key right off the top is the leadership. The second major issue that we have in Liberia is we are a rentier state. We rent everything, all of our resources, the iron ore, even the sand from the beach. We're just a rentier state. We depend on economic growth through concessions. We don't have we don't have a plan that doesn't rely on us renting our resources. Even the fish in the ocean, we rent everything. So that reliance on the extractive sectors, on renting, being a rentier state, means there's very little innovation in terms of looking at some of these things then that have been mentioned that other countries have managed to do. The leadership in those countries, they have a vision. If you look at how places like Singapore, with very little in terms of the resources that Liberia has, what Lee Kuan Yew managed to do. If you look at a country like Botswana that gained independence, 1966 or so, roughly 59 years old, what managed? It was the leadership that came in and turned things around. So, leadership, the mindset of a rentier state, has been causing us not to think innovatively. The third thing that has been hurting us, which is what we're going to feel now, is this whole mindset of being reliant on foreign aid. Liberia has relied so heavily on foreign aid. So the demise of USAID, right? The whole thing about USAID going away, African countries that have been relying on foreign aid have to wake up now and find other means to boost up their budget, to boost up income and development in the country without this reliance. So if you don't change the mindset of the leadership, and I'm not just saying leadership in terms of the president, but you have to look at the legislators, right? In most countries, some of the main issues that's taking place, it is within the legislative body. Look at the fiasco with the speakership. So those are the kind of things that is hurting us, right? So you fix that, you get the innovation going, you get the mindset of relying on foreign aid going, then you start bringing in the technocrats that will be able to help transfer the knowledge. People shouldn't just leave the diaspora, go down there, go try to do the work. Go down there and set up an opportunity to train the young people, because only when you have a large, a critical mass of people with the same or with a certain amount of the knowledge, that you can lead towards development. So we're stuck in this trap. We're stuck in this poverty trap, and we haven't been able to use remittances positively because just based on the data and what I've been seeing, uh, those are the three key issues. The leadership, relying on foreign aid, and just being that rentier state has been killing innovation in the country.
Yeah. Thank you. Thomas, I know you're late to the party, but glad to have you. We're talking about the impact of remittances to Africa, Liberia, and what other ways we can channel this quantum of money, which is about 800 million annually, to effect change and effect development in Liberia. So that's what we're talking about. And I think the question now is pretty much, how do we harness, how do we get government involved, right? From you and I, which is basically the consumer, you send money back home to your family, they receive the money to do whatever they have to do with it, whatever project you guys are targeting. But also there is also examples of countries such as Rwanda, India, Ethiopia, that are harnessing the government to create and coalesce the diaspora around investments to take on major projects, right? The question here is, why is it Liberia cannot adopt some of these examples to implement?
Thank you, Gabriel. I will just build on what Larry was saying.
Mhm.
And I think this is the time now for the government of Liberia to start to look at all of these other opportunities that are out there. So if I can just go back a bit in uh, in history, 1960, 1970s, all of these countries around Africa get independence. They start to borrow heavily to fund development, build dams, build roads, and all of that. So by the 70s and 80s, we get into this huge debt crisis. Onto the 1990s, they had to really push for debt waiver. And so from 1990s on to the early 2000s, there wasn't really much focus on domestic resource mobilization on the continent. Much of the focus was on ensuring that these governments were able to spend money that was going to go to the continent through aid. I mean, you remember all of these developed countries even started competing as to who was going to meet the 0.7% of their GNI that was going to go to aid. So those from the 1990s on to the early 2000s, that's why the World Bank used to do this public expenditure review. They were looking at how they were spending money. But on to the early 2000s to 2010 till now, there has been a focus now on the revenue side. How do you collect money and how do you also spend it? So I just wanted to say this to buttress while Larry was saying that there was a lot of attention on aid. We're going to give these poor countries money. And there was this focus on really addressing poverty. We all remember the poverty reduction strategies that were put in place when the debts were waived. But we've moved beyond that now. Where we are now is for you to look for your own money. And if you cannot look for it domestically within your borders, there are some of your citizens that are out of the country that are out there, in many instances that are in high level income countries that can make money. Why don't tap into it to be able to fund development back home? And with aid, really, the architecture of aid uh, really changing, not only the closure of USAID with all the countries that are cutting aid, I think this is the time to think critically about how the government will be able to raise money to fund development activities back home. And we have seen this work, right? When elections are going on in Liberia, quite recently in the 2023 election, we saw how much resources were flowing from the diaspora back home to fund the election. And with the improvement in technology now, we have these platforms through which people can make payments. They don't have to be in the country physically to contribute. People can contribute through SendWave, they can contribute through Remitly, and all other platforms that can be used. But the point is, when election is coming, that's the time stakeholders think that the diaspora can play a critical role. So people start visiting Australia, they go to the US, they go to Europe. When elections are over, everybody go back to Liberia, pass the budget, implement the budget. So if we are going to move forward with everything that is happening now, the government needs to learn from other countries like the panelists before me were saying. If other countries have done it, we can be able to do it. But one thing I really wanted to highlight is the only way the diaspora can invest in these kind of development programs back home, they have to see that if they send $1, it can be used for the intended purpose and it can be used efficiently. So that's where addressing corruption back home and improving governance is very critical. Because if that does not happen, nobody is going to send their money. For the past couple of months, I see Dualu and some other colleagues, I think, working on something they call Diaspora Equity Fund. Why can't the government have a conversation with them to see what they are thinking on? I mean, it's an idea. At a certain point,
Yep.
we have to start somewhere. If
Yep.
somebody is thinking on it, can the government have a conversation with them to see how it can be programmed into a program that can transfer funds back home? Maybe people can buy equity in businesses that are on the ground, SMEs that are working, people in the diaspora can invest. You can issue diaspora bond, but the point is, it has to start with good governance. The government has to be seen as less corrupt and really investing in the people. Then the diaspora can be able to come in.
Yeah. So here's the point that I want to make, and I think I and I hold this thought, you know, and I stand by it. I think it's not just and I think Prof actually alluded to that. I think she actually stated that They see us, the people in the government see us competition. I don't think they don't just see it as competition because of, I think there's an incompetent problem there. I think there's an incompetence problem because here's the reason why. You, Thomas, Larry, Prof here, right, are very astute individual, right? Now, if there's anything that is a common denominator with all of us here is that you want to be in a company of people like yourself, right? Because you feed off of ideas from these people, right? The conversation we're having here, there's so much that we are learning from each other. However, if you have a what do you call insecurity or incompetent problem, you will not want to be in this because you will feel that you being around them, it exposes you. It exposes your limitation. And I think that's a lot of it that we see in the government, right? This is why you see people like Larry, Prof, and many other who have the expertise trying to get close to this government to offer a solution, they get sidelined. So I think fundamentally is an incompetence problem. I say this and I will double down on it on another point here. We have a minister of finance who was the former minister of finance during, he was a minister of finance during Ellen time. He got elected again. He got appointed again. This is someone who you think will have a different perspective. I understand you took on the job as a minister of finance. Maybe you were wearing that, you're knowledgeable or whatever it is, but you've had time outside. You worked in other areas. You need to, besides just coming and just being a high level paper and pen pusher, minister of finance, you were expected some level of innovation. Some of these ideas we're talking about, this is the person who could have been who should be channeling these ideas, coming to the diaspora to say, there is a budget limitation, there is a budget shortfall every time since this post-war. How do we get beyond that, right? There is a tax limitation on the tax base in this country. How do we supplement, how do we leverage the diaspora to carry on some of these development? Yes, I may not have the ability to single-handedly change the budget the way I wanted to focus on development, but there are other resources like the diaspora. So we have people like that, we put in power, we egg them on as if these, but in actuality, there's a fundamental level of incompetence that are hidden above those bravados that you see. We cannot make excuses to say Liberians are intelligent and all of this anymore. Yes, we are, but we take the least qualified people and put them in power, and then we celebrate them. To celebrate them to fail, So the problem, and I continue to hold this thought, and I'll hold it until Judgment Day, is an incompetence problem. Because you cannot say 22 years after the war, right? There is no inkling of a middle class in Liberia. You're either a little bit of money in the government because you're working in the government or some NGO, or you're at the bottom of the totem pole. The middle class we have is in the diaspora. And not a single minister of finance have thought about that to say, okay, if we came out of war 22 years ago, how do we put ourselves on a trajectory to compete regionally, to be like the Ghana, the Rwanda, that have had similar challenges that we've had? Nobody, not any president, not any minister of finance, not any minister of commerce. But yet we have good examples. Rwanda, Ghana, right next to Cote d'Ivoire, they just raise bonds, but nobody talks about these things. So that's my theory. And this is something that I believe, and I think this is a challenge we have in our country. No innovation. We have people who are very incompetent, who have no inclination of how the global finance work and how to get us out of to where we need to go. I yield.
You nailed it. You nailed it, Gabriel. It ties directly to what I was saying in terms of the leadership, the lack of innovation. But let me say this because I'll have to be heading out soon. So, and I think I said this on this show, we discussed it, something like this last week. So I want to say this, what's the challenges they're going to be facing, right? I think you remember I mentioned that within 2 to 3 years, within every Liberian government, within 2 to 3 years, something something happens globally that impacts the economic growth in Liberia. Coming out of the war, within I think 2 to 3 years or so, we had the global financial crisis when the big major investment banks in the U.S. started failing. Right, the Lehman Brothers started failing. All these companies and Bear Stearns all start failing. That impacted growth globally. LA had to face that. It didn't take long after that, when we were coming out of the financial crisis, that immediately the three nations within West Africa got hit with Ebola. And I can remember when Katie Couric went and she interviewed, she did an interview with Madame Salif at the time. And Madame Salif was preaching about how she had one of the highest GDP growth. But this was a country that had been producing rubber for decades, and we didn't have latex gloves in the country, which was sad. We didn't have PPE, and we were losing the very little, the low number of healthcare professionals in the country. So that happened like around 2013. By the time we emerged out of things like it, and of course, when Ebola hit, all of the concession companies left. So not only did we have a healthcare crisis, we also had a huge, massive economic problems. So by the time we emerged out of that, by March of 2020, what happened? Boom, we got hit with COVID. You had COVID, again, global economic crisis, impacted the global economy. Again, Liberia couldn't grow. By the time we started emerging out of COVID, 2020, 21, 22 or so, then we started running into the issues of Russia attacking Ukraine, and we found out that Ukraine produces so much grain for the rest of the world. We didn't understand the impact of that. But what this government is going to see now is it's not even going to be 2 years. You're going to see, because you guys have seen this, right? The threat of a global recession because of the tariffs brought about in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this threat, this lingering threat of global recession. That means there's going to be a slowdown in economic activity. That means there's going to be a number of people who may potentially lose their job. That means there's going to be a slowdown in the amount of remittances going back to the country. So you can see the downstream effect, right? And this is going to be within 2 years of President Black administration. What you've also seen is the whole demise of USAID. USAID was pumping roughly $500 million in terms of economic activity to Liberia. So we have a triple threat happening right now. You have the demise of USAID, that economic activity is gone. It's like the unmailed drawdown in Liberia, right? It had an economic impact. You have the threat of global recession, and then you still have the lingering effect of the Russian war in Ukraine. So those are the things they're going to be faced with. That's why when they said they were going to be proposing a budget of around 800 or so million, it's just ludicrous. And then saying they're going to try to raise, I don't know how many billions or so for the president's economic development plan. I came right off the top and said that is absolute nonsense. It's never going to happen. Why? Because you don't use the financial sector, the financial system in the way that other countries like you just mentioned, Cote d'Ivoire, Rwanda, Kenya, those countries that have sovereign debt ratings from the ratings agencies, the Fitch, the Moody's, the Standard and Poor's, those countries that have those ratings, they can go to the sovereign bond market and they can raise billions in capital. Liberia, since you had this debt forgiveness for a highly indebted poor country, the HIPC, and you entered into this program with the IMF program, you don't have a credit rating. You cannot raise that kind of money like that. And when I asked former Finance Minister Samuel Tuet why they haven't worked on building Liberia's credit ratings to be able to go and raise billions like other countries do, he said, oh, they started working on it, but they stopped. They stopped. So, look, this government right now, if you don't get the technocrats in there to help, you're going nowhere. Nowhere. And if you go and check the U.S. Department of Commerce website, it talks about why Liberia has the potential to redevelop. Why? Because at one time, we were up there, right? We had very good electricity. We have very good healthcare system. We have very good education. I'm a product of the Liberian education system, albeit I left, and entered high school, junior high school over in New York City. But when I left and I came and entered high school, the work that I was doing in math, it was so higher than the kids then who were born right here in the US and doing that same level of work. So we had, and that was all because we had some very highly technical people in Liberia at the time. So to your point, Gabriel, we just don't have the technocrats and the innovators working in any administration since the end of the war. So we're stuck in this poverty trap.
All right, thank you. Uh, Prof, you wanted to say something, or Thomas, before we? What I want us to do, maybe we after this, we should maybe
No,
take
well,
calls
yeah.
from Liberia. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, Thomas and Larry are the experts. I was just gonna say that, a lot of people say, oh, the people from the diaspora when they come, they don't do anything, and I agree with Larry that it's the quality of the people that you bring.
Yeah,
It's you don't want to pay a lot of money, so you bring people who maybe are not well versed in their field, and then when they fail, you say, you see, the people in the diaspora, they don't do anything. No, it's the quality of people that you bring. I was trying to find a Botswana Pula fund, right? Like
oh,
Larry was saying, nobody wants to get to nobody wants. Can you hear me?
yes, we can. Yes,
Oh, nobody wants to lend money to a broke person. It's as simple as that. If the country is broke, nobody wants to lend money. If the country is untrustworthy, nobody wants to lend money. In Botswana, they put the all of the excess that they got from the diamond into a Pula fund. I think that Pula fund, that sovereign fund, is over $10 billion now. None of the students who come here to us from Botswana are on scholarships. The government pay for them. All of them have a health care, retirement. They go back to everything is paid for. The Pula fund is there. So if Botswana goes right now and say, "Oh, we need to borrow $10 million," the World Bank wants to give them because they are reputable. You didn't see them shake when
yep.
USAID was closing. They didn't complain that USAID was leaving. So for me, I just think that it all comes down to priorities, Gabriel. What is it that Liberia wants? Where does Liberia want to go? How is Liberia going to get there? How are they going to harness the things that will make them get there?
Mm,
And all the other things, they're just noise. They have to have the list of priorities because we cannot continue this dance around the main things that we're supposed to be discussing. And until that happens, we're going to be stuck in this. You need a frank discussion with the citizens, because the citizens are saying, well, we voted for you, make our lives better. So you're going to come back to them and say, look, here is the prevailing conditions in the world, in the global world, and because of that, this is what we cannot offer. But if you start telling them, oh, we're going to give you this, give you that, and then it doesn't come to fruition, it's a problem. I'll turn it over to Thomas.
Thomas.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, we are at a point where we need, normally people can say, think out of the box. Maybe that box is Liberia. Liberia is a very small country, except the resources that we have. In terms of population, it's very limited. We don't have a large market. Countries that are extremely populated, even with all of the governance challenges that they have, capital can still flow to them because people think when they do businesses in those countries, they will be able to recoup whatever they invest. But it's not a case of Liberia. And so with everything that is going on now, even with capital, I mean, we're talking about go to capital market and all of that. There's going to be huge competition because with aid gone, the competition is now going to be on how you attract foreign direct investment into your own country. And so if we don't have that kind of credibility, if we don't improve governance, it's going to be very difficult to attract any form of capital. And on the issue of the credit rating issue, Normally, countries that have these credit ratings are countries that have domestic capital markets. I mean, Gabriel, this is your area.
Yeah.
But do we have that in Liberia? No. Local governments in other countries that have local governments can even borrow. So you have subnational capital markets where local governments can go out there and be able to borrow money. But we don't have any of that in Liberia. We've just been holding everything in Monrovia and nothing is open up. Everything is decided right in Monrovia, and that is really harming the country. And coming back to what Jackie said in terms of people who go back, there's often every government in Liberia has a mixture of people from the diaspora and people on the ground. The only government that had very little number of people from the diaspora was the CDC government. But for the Manansali 12 years, we had people working in the government who were from the diaspora. Even in this government, we have a lot of people from the diaspora. But one thing for me that I'm observing over the past few years of the penetration of the internet and with the connection of the diaspora to the to Liberia, many of those who are very active when it comes to politics are not technically the strong ones that are in the diaspora. Because like we had,
Yeah.
yeah, like we had Professor Larry here, he had to leave because maybe he got something to go and do. But those people who are spending the rest of the day, 24 hours on the internet and talking and talking and talking and talking, these are the people after elections that are attracted back home. Some of them maybe just got a degree or high school degree, but because they are on the internet, they talk 24 hours, they call them back home to go and work. And when they go, they don't really have that technical capacity to be able to move things forward. In Liberia, the whole national government doesn't really work well on policy. Everyone is tied down with delivery of services, which is not even being done well. Education ministry, you mentioned Ministry of Commerce. The national government should be focused outward and thinking forward so that local governments can deliver services at the local level. But the Ministry of Education is concerned with how many chairs Sano County got in their elementary school. They fix the chairs in Monrovia and then they transport it. When is the Minister of Education going to think about AI? Kenya and other countries just started developing AI or strategies for the next 5 years. They are looking forward. Our government is always looking downwards. All the ministries are concerned about what is happening in Nova, what is happening in Maryland. Remove the service delivery function from those national governments so that they can sit down and focus on policy. Like Larry was saying, every 5 years we have a crisis. How can we build the system in such a way that those external global crises cannot affect us so much at the national level? That will have to do with a lot of thinking. It has to do with putting a lot of policy wonks together so that they can be able to pay attention to it. How do we attract remittances and remove them from household consumption to national investment? That will have to do with a lot of thinking. But if you leave that with national ministries that focus on service delivery, they won't have the time to think 5 years, 10 years down the line.
Yeah. Thank you. It's George. Is it George in the studio? Is it possible we can take the next maybe few minutes to take some calls if we have any from Liberia? Then what we can do next, we can go to the comment section and maybe read up some comments from there, and then look to wrap up within the next few minutes or so, 30 minutes or so. So if you have any, maybe if you have any callers, we can take some calls and at least let's get the local perspective in terms of what's happening there.
Okay, for folks,
Please.
wherever you are, if you just tune in on Care Radio 95.9, the program you are listening to Focus Library on Care Radio 95.9, the numbers to call in and be a part 0777 959 959 0777 959 959, the numbers to call and be a part on the show this afternoon. So once the call comes in, I will let you guys know.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. All right. While we wait for for calls to come in, maybe we can read out some of the comments here, and then I'll maybe get your perspectives on these as well. I know this is.
Okay, Brother Gabriel,
Go
let me
ahead.
just. Yeah, we
Yeah.
have our first brother here.
Okay.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, please, my brother, please lower your monitor a little bit. The feedback. Please, the feedback from your end. Lower your monitor a little bit. Good afternoon.
Yeah, how are you?
We're doing great. Your name and where you calling from?
Yeah, Sharp. I'm calling from Zata.
Your name, sir.
Mohammed.
Hello. We can't. He's not audible. George, we can't hear him.
Okay, my brother. So the numbers to call in, another call's coming in again. Let me take the call that's right here. Oh, we lost it there. The numbers to call in. Yep, more calls coming in. Good afternoon. Hello, caller. Oh, it's gonna be like that caller's not ready yet. The numbers to call in 0777959 The numbers to call in, be a part on the show on Focus Liberia. Let's go. Good afternoon. Yes, sir. Your name and where you calling from? Welcome. Welcome to the program.
Hey, George. I think the phone might be far away from the mic. We can't hear him.
Can, can you please do me a favor by lowering your mic a little bit? Yes, much better.
George, we can't hear him. Can you hear him? Can George hear us? Is it? I don't think George can hear us. No. Okay.
Madam Feliz.
There you go. Perfect. Hello.
He's muted.
Yeah. George, can you hear us? Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's. George, can you hear us? Okay. Let's do this. Let's go through the comments on the show here, and then we can segue into because we have less than 30 minutes to wrap up here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can hear you, George.
We can't. George, can you hear us? I think he himself is disconnected from us. All right. Let's. jump into this comments. Right. I don't want to cut him off while he's listening to these people as well.
No, we can hear him if we listen carefully.
Okay,
we
my
can
brother,
hear him.
thanks for calling. The numbers to call in on the show 0777 959 959 0777 959 959. The numbers to call and be a part on the show. Care Radio 95.9. We're transmitting from Union Drive, opposite the PTD Barry. Yeah, this afternoon. Brother Keeper, you have some call from your end?
You said we have a call? Hello?
You have any call from your end?
No. We don't have any call here. We're not opening the phone line here. We didn't
I'm not
set it
getting
up.
you.
So, no, we do not. We do not have any calls. So what we're
Good
going to do
afternoon.
instead? Yeah, can you hear me?
We're doing great. Your name and where you calling from? You call? Okay, my brother. Welcome to the program. Okay, my brother. Guys, can you hear me from your end?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not getting you guys from your end there. I think something wrong
Yeah, we
somewhere.
can't.
But
We couldn't hear the callers clearly as well. So I think
okay,
there
let me
might
take
be
a very short break to be right back. Yeah, I think we
okay.
have some technical
Yeah.
problem from our end.
Okay.
I'm not
So
getting you
what would
guys there. I
okay?
think
What we'll
something
do?
wrong
We'll
somewhere
continue.
too.
Well, you can hear us, so I don't know who I'm not talking to. Let's continue with the comments
Um,
here while he's
Gabriel, I'm
speaking.
not getting you guys there at all.
All right.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
not getting you guys there at all. At all.
are you in the background? Can you hear us on the? Can you see the comments on the background? Okay. Let's go to the comments so we can get this going. All right. So, um, I know some of these comments are probably old. If I could pronounce your name, Kudropo, Kuproduct, whatever you call yourself.
The,
What an
the comment
interesting
is
name.
the comment is as old as Nigeria.
I know you're watching with us. You're laughing at us too because we can't even. I can't pronounce your name or whatever it is. But your comment said diaspora has been sending money to Liberia since 1828. Marcus Garvey sent money from the land and impeached President Charles D.B. King. And impeached
So the
President
land to
Charles D.B. King,
Firestone.
sold the land to Firestone. People have been scammed since 1920. Um, Maybe Thomas can provide any perspective. I don't know anything about that. Uh, but thank you for your comment. At
I
least
think
that is
George is back.
George. Can you hear us? Okay, let me bring him in. George, can you hear us now? George, it's a studio problem. All right, so this might be relevant. Um, this is LD Labrendalo. I, I just love our people, man. He said, he said sometimes when senders send money for investment purposes, the recipients still use the funds for consumption, which is true. there's a lot of emphasis. There's a lot of emphasis should be focused on recipient because a lot rests on them. Hmm. Uh, that's any thoughts on that? I think I want to agree with this comment as well. You know, any comments on this one before we go on to the next one?
Yeah, I think the point he's making there is there's often this issue of people sending money from the diaspora for investment purposes. And there's one thing we have to say all of the remittances is not really going to consumption. There are some people who are sending it for building houses, for investing in businesses, but in many instances, even their family members. We have had multiple stories where somebody says, I send money to that brother to build my house, but then somebody else in the family went and built his house and they scam them. So
Yeah.
that actually does undercut the desire to send remittances back home. But this is why when I talk about governance, if you improve governance much more broadly, even those things can be reduced. But they are happening, citizens are doing it to their family members, and nothing is coming out of it. And in the end, people in the diaspora just decide and say, okay, I'll just keep my money here. And if I want to do any investment in Liberia, I have to go to the country myself. And while that person is in Liberia paying attention to that investment, they are losing income from where they are coming from.
Hmm.
So if those things can be improved, they can be able to really help with channeling money from the diaspora going back home.
Yeah. Prof.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Liberian Dollar and Thomas. Um, it depends on the recipient. You know, you can send money here. You can just leave your job and run there to make sure that it's being used for the intended purposes. That's why sometimes when people go home, they almost have heart attack because their house is not built, or there's only the foundation of the house. Like he says, a lot rests on the recipients. It's the trustworthiness of the individual. It's also this impunity. If somebody uses my money to build their own house, or they use my money for something else, can I get a redress? How long will it take for me to go to court? Where's the access to justice that would happen? Liberia, I mean, one thing doesn't exist in a vacuum in Liberia. Things have to work together.
Yeah.
So you send money home, the person eat your money, you can go to the court, and when you go to the court, they say, oh, the next case will be 2 years. You have to come back, because some people bank on that. Oh, Thomas is going to come to Liberia, but he can only stay for 1 week because he got to go back to
Right.
work. So yeah. So the government really has to work to have an enabling a condition in the country, because I'm telling you, Gabriel, like sometimes when I go home, I'm like, if I get sick here, what's gonna happen? That's my greatest fear. And I'm not
Yeah.
even saying about getting to about the hospital. I'm saying, would there even be an ambulance to take me there? So
Take you
so
to the
those
place.
things,
Yeah.
the government, yeah, it's what Thomas said. The government has to start working to make the country so that we don't just come back for Christmas, that we see this place as part of us. That's what
Yeah.
needs to be happening.
So LD here again, he's very active. Look, he got a lot of like rent dollar on him. He said in a low trust society, it's pretty hard to guarantee that even when you earmark funds for investment, it'll actually be used as such. He talks about, I think,
Yeah.
Prof, you talked about this trust issue earlier as well, the social
Yeah.
trust, and yeah, yeah,
And you see, Gabriel, if I can make a point here, public
yeah,
policy in some instances is individual actions that affect uh, the greater public. It could just be between two individuals. The government can be able to uh, put measures in place either through regulation or policy to be able to address it. Say, for instance, in Liberia now, before you are issued a marriage certificate, you have to present a single certificate that you were single,
hmm,
because we repeatedly
Yes.
had a problem with people leaving marriages and then remarrying when they are not divorced. So the government came in and said, okay, before you go and marry now, you have to produce a certificate that shows that you are single. So the government doesn't bother you. They don't collect that money from you until you go and say you want to get married. Then the government say now you have to produce a certificate to show that you are single. I'm raising this point to say if the government had repeatedly seen that people are scamming people from the diaspora,
They should do
why
something
can't the
about
government do something about it?
it.
Find a
Yes.
way to
Yes.
find because this is like investment, right? You take savings, people borrow it, and then they invest it. So there has to be a medium through which that will be intermediated. How can the government be able to find a vehicle through which those funds that are coming, if family members are taking it away and misusing it, how can there be a platform through which it can be channeled into the country? Because when it's invested in the country, people building house, they will hire people to move bricks, they will hire people to draw water to cook food. All of that will create jobs.
Yeah.
So this has to come to the attention of people or to the government, even though it's happening in some instances among family members, but they are citizens. And it does affect the overall trust in the country.
Yeah. And there's another comment here that also speaks to this whole diaspora thing. He said, this is John Smith. Um, he said, remittances definitely create dependency. Our people not even farming anymore. Our people are not even farming anymore. They are all sitting in Moravia waiting for control numbers. No more control number. It goes to it goes through the same way. No more control number to pick up. But I get the point that he's trying to make. Meaning, and this is, I think, Thomas, this is something you've talked about extensively. Meaning, there's the decentralized thing that is not happening anymore, where everybody's leaving the villages and coming to Moravia, and everything is being centralized right in Moravia, including because everybody thinks there's a whole every opportunity lies right in Moravia. Now, if we had decentralized the country, there would be no need for people leaving those other counties to come to Moravia to think that every
Yes.
opportunity they have is
Yes.
actually in
Yes.
Moravia. Yeah, I think that's what he's speaking to here. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, what else we have on here? LD.
You,
Um,
you, you know,
go ahead, bro.
Gabriel, another thing that that we can talk about later is
Yeah.
that, but the pendulum has also swung. We
Uh-huh.
see people in the diaspora using businesses in Liberia to support their lifestyles here.
Mm.
So it's not only people sending money home to help people.
Yeah.
Don't I don't want for the people back home to think that we're talking down to them or saying, because we see that some people here, what they are doing, they're going there opening businesses, letting
Hmm.
their family run the businesses, and that money comes to them
Yeah.
to support their mortgages, their car payments. So it's
Hmm.
not just, oh, we're sending money home. The thing is also, oh, we're sending money home to open that business, so that money comes to me because I also now have. So the diaspora also, some people see their home country as a place where they can also get rich. And what we discussed that when we say it's not a philanthropic organization. Everybody wants something from something,
Hmm.
yeah. But the thing is that it comes to priorities. You said
Yeah.
no. She says here nobody is farming anymore. But if the government and the diaspora joins together and start funding farms, people will farm. You know.
Yeah.
But what I always like to say to people is that why would somebody go farm, Gabriel, when the same method of farming is the hoe? You are using a hoe
Hmm.
to farm. Your back is hurting. You have very small yields. The government, like the Zambian government, you can even rent these tillers that they till the ground, and you can
Yeah.
grow, because nobody wants to have back breaking
To
work on a farm when they
yeah.
can, like you say, come and sit for control numbers. Farming is very labor intensive. It's the government, like Thomas said, it's the policy now to say, how can we induce people to go and make farm by not using these rudimentary things like hoe that
Yeah.
they are still using. Yeah.
That's great. All right.
So there is something critical that happened in that space that Jackie is talking about. Before the war, people, for instance, in Lofa, just do their farm work, they do their swamp work. Many people had not even gone to Monrovia, except for those who went to maybe work on the Firestone plantation. But when the Civil War took place, it displaced people. From Maryland, they went to Ivory Coast. And in many instances, when they went as refugees, they did not settle in villages. They stayed in towns, in cities.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
people got exposed to living a city life. So much of the
Yes.
people in Lofa went to Guinea, they were in Gegedu, they were in Masanta, and then they also got used to urban livelihood. They will buy and resell. And so after the Civil War, when those people come back from Ivory Coast, they come back from Guinea, they come back from Sierra Leone, who spent 5 years, 6 years, or almost 10 years in refugee camps without farming. And you expect them to take the cutlass and the hoe and go and farm the way they were farming in the 1970s and 1980s. It's not going to happen. And then
It's
you
not
have
going to happen.
it's not going to happen. You have the internet now. You have DSTV where they have to watch Barca, they have to watch Chelsea, they have to watch Real Madrid because they have to argue in the evening. So the farming time has reduced. The time and labor that is committed to farming has reduced. The other thing is because of rural urban migration. Many of the young people are in the cities going to school. So if you are now
Yes.
going to invest resources into the agriculture sector to mechanize it, it can even be the A letter, the first letter in the arrest agenda. It's not going to work. Productivity will not increase.
Yes.
The volume will not increase.
Yes.
So we have to look at that whole sector in a different way now.
Yeah, thank you. And Hamilton has a statement here. Hamilton Zili, I think hopefully I pronounced that properly. If not, forgive me. He said Liberia needs to focus on strong, transparent governance, diaspora engagement, diversification of our economy, private sector investment, education, healthcare system development, and infrastructure development. Man, Hamilton, clap for yourself. Thank you. That is yeah, great, 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 great,
That,
great comment. Yeah,
that's the national development plan,
Jewish
right?
is back.
James is okay. Can you hear us now?
Yes, guys, I can hear you guys now. Settle the issues.
Okay,
I got
man,
issues with.
perfect. I know we're 8 minutes away from closing, so we'll stick with the comments, and then the next question here I think will be the final question before we wrap up. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this comments, this statement that Hamilton made.
I mean, like I said, this is just the national development plan. If you look at the national development plan, all of what he has highlighted here are in the national development plan. Transparent governance. This is what we keep talking about. Diaspora engagement. I don't think it has been strategic. In many instances, is to get them back in the country, and then they have this cultural dance where they bring Julie Andy to come and dance. But it has to be much more strategic. How do you tap into the resources of the diaspora, both in terms of human capital and financial capital, and redirect it to the country? And Jackie said something. The capital that people have, for instance, in the US to start a business might be very limited. But in Liberia, it's a huge amount. If you even have 5,000, you have 10,000, that's huge amount for you to start a business. People in Australia, in Europe, they want to send that money back home to start businesses for themselves. Because in many instances, the return on business in these developing countries can be higher than in very mature economies. So people want to send money back home to do business. So diaspora engagement has to be much more strategic rather than just celebratory. Diversification of the economy away from the natural resource sector is something we have to focus on. And that will have to do with really expanding the private sector. Yeah, he said private sector investment, education and health, really increasing the quality, right? Education, we had a show on it in terms of quantity. Number of schools are increasing, community colleges all over, but that quality, so people can do real technical work, is something we need to focus on. Healthcare, improve the service delivery. Every day there is talk about no medicine in the hospitals and all of that. The ambulance system, so that Jackie can spend more in the country and see investment opportunities to invest in them. We have to pay attention to. And infrastructure
Yeah.
Yeah.
is critical because on the tax side, the reason why we always give a lot of tax waiver to companies is because we don't have infrastructure. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah.
roads. We don't have electricity. And so when you are attracting foreign direct investment into your country, because you don't have the social infrastructure,
Have
you
to
don't
give a
have this,
lot away.
you have to
Yeah,
give a lot away.
yeah.
So if we can build our infrastructure, we have a new president at LEC who said current will not be going up. We'll be waiting to see. But we need to improve these things so that we can be able to get the best out of both our natural resources and the investment that will come to the country. So I think why he says here is just overall what should be the national development plan, which is in the national development plan, but the implementation is where we normally fall short because of the capacity and capabilities in the country.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with Thomas, Gabriel, just shortly, and I agree with Hamilton. And
Mhm.
thank you, Hamilton, for listing these two things, Gabriel. The lack of these things in our country hampers development. And I will give you two instances. When I went home every day, right? My auntie would go down waterside to buy fish to come and cook. So one day I went down waterside and I said, you know what? Let me, she always going down waterside. Let me help her today.
Yeah,
Gabriel, I bought fish, like almost $20 worth of fish. I brought it. And I said, I said, Auntie Gino, you know what? You can keep the fish because now you don't have to go every day to go cook. You know
to
what she
buy
said to
fish.
me?
Yeah,
You know what she said to me? Because my mind said was different. She said, Jackie, all the fish you now buy, we get lay.
it will go to waste.
It never occurred to me
Yeah,
that because of the lack of electricity, she had to go every day. That's a waste
every
of yours,
day.
you know. And
Time.
then the second, yeah, and then the second one, I was living in, I think, Broadville.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord, Gabriel, to come from Broadville to cross that Tucker Bridge
Gabriel
that goes
Tucker
to
Bridge.
one
Yeah.
lane. No, so the traffic. So you say to yourself, "Oh, I gotta get up 6 o'clock in the morning because I have an appointment at 10 o'clock."
Yeah.
The
Imagine.
time wasted
Yeah.
in the traffic is too much. It's too much. They need to build overpasses. They need to widen that road to maybe 4 lanes. They we don't have a ministry of research and planning anymore, but the population is growing. We need to have all of these things because the amount of
Yeah.
time that is wasted, time is money and people waste time trying to get from one place to the other. So
Yeah.
so with no electricity, nobody's going to develop. With no education and healthcare system, nothing's going to develop. So I agree
Yeah.
with Hamilton and Thomas that this government has to put priorities in place, not just oh, how many chairs inside. No, we need priorities and policies to move forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think time is, oh man, I wish we
Yeah.
would have had time for the final question, which was pretty much to offer some kind of solution to what the government can do with remittances, but we do not have time. Time is fast spent. I agree with you. I think time, I think the two most valuable gifts you can give somebody are your time and a good book. That's
Yep.
that's my belief. Yeah. So if you have somebody wasting their time, that's a resource that is they don't have in abundance that is being given away. But with that said, I think we've covered a lot. I think the next session we should look at the reciprocal effect. Like you said, people who have businesses in Liberia that are investing in Liberia and using that investment to supplement their incomes here in the diaspora, which I think is a great topic to talk about. Maybe we can do that. We can do a second series on this. But I enjoyed the conversation, so I would like your closing thoughts, argument, but mostly look at it from a solution-based perspective. If you were in the shoe, I want you to put your government hat on as if you were in some kind of position in the government. I like to put people in this kind of role. What would you do? You know, what would be some of the initiative that you take on to solve this diaspora deficit we have, the, the remittance deficit or lack of investment that we have? Imagine yourself as the president or as the minister of finance. What would you do?
I will defer to Thomas first.
Okay, Thomas,
He's the expert.
the burden is on you.
Yeah, we are in a very critical moment with what we're saying about aid and all the global things that are happening globally. This is the time to really think critically and plan strategically. And you're not going to do that with if you don't have the training, if you don't have the skills to be able to do it. You know, Jackie mentioned something which we have overlooked for many years, and every time it keeps coming up, but we're not paying attention to it. The closure of the Ministry of Planning and Economic Affairs. It was this ministry that used to do long-term thinking in planning. Where do we want to be 20 years from now, 25 years from now? But at a certain point, the point was that, okay, you do all of that planning, but it's not linked to the budget. It was like they were just sitting up on Capitol Hill and doing all of these forecasting, and then the Ministry of Finance was not paying attention to what they were doing. So there was not a link between our plans and our budget. So because of that, we merged planning ministry with the Ministry of Finance. But after planning merged with finance, planning happens to have gone. Nobody knows where it has gone. So except for the National Development Plan that is done 5 years, there is no strategic thinking about urban development, no strategic thinking about service delivery, no strategic thinking about diaspora engagement because there is no one paying attention to it. So when Minister Boima Kamara went for confirmation, that was the first question that Senator Chie of Grand Crew asked him. And then his point was that maybe we need to go back to planning because on the continent there are different models. In Uganda, it's merged. They have planning and finance together. In Ghana, they have a separate planning entity. I think even in Ethiopia, they are separated. So his point was that maybe we need to go back. When Minister Gafuan went for confirmation, they asked him the very same question. Where has planning gone? And he said we need to do a research to see what direction to follow. All the ministries in Liberia, some of them have deputy ministers for planning and research, but you don't see any output. They don't do any research. So if we are really going to move forward with where we are, with the changing nature of the way the world is changing, we need
Yeah.
to focus on research and planning.
Okay.
So that it goes beyond the national development plan. The national development plan is something you just bring people together, they can do literature review and write it. But strategically, in 2030 and 2035, how will people be leaving Broadview to come to Central Monrovia? How
That's
will they get there?
yeah.
Is that road that is going through Cinco will equal with the population that will be in 2035 and 2040? So to do that, we need to invest in capacity building. Ministry of Finance, for instance, how many doctorate degree holders do we have there? Maybe people like us, the government should be saying, come and go to school. You have many young people with master degrees, send them to school so that they can come back. So that that kind of thinking and long-term planning can be done. So I think for me, whether it's on remittances, on everything has to go into critical thinking, strategic development, and the implementation of those strategies. But that has to come from the capacity side. The government of Liberia invests no amount in capacity. They don't have any, except for Morocco bilateral scholarship. They themselves don't take their money to send people to school. They don't do it at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we need to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, I know we have we're
No,
over
no,
our time, so I would like to
I defer to Thomas. Everything Thomas said, I agree, you know. So
yeah.
so yeah, Thomas and I we speak with one voice on this.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And again, thank you guys for taking your time to join us. For those in social media watching us on live online, thank you for your comments, your perspectives as well. Even for those who call in, this is a topic. Hopefully, we will do another session next Saturday. Hopefully, but yeah, this was a great discussion, and as
Yeah.
we like to say, hopefully you were able to take something away from it. We were not here to bash anybody. We were just looking at problems and, in addition, offering solution. And whether you agree with what we stated here as problems or solutions, there is a common denominator, and that is the fact that we are all Liberians. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your weekends. Ciao.
We are Liberians. Liberia is Liberia people